Hello and welcome to the Concise training Google Hangout video in which we're going to talk about Twitter usernames and how you should be using them. So I'm going to share with you a PowerPoint presentation which we'll go through, and I'll be giving you some tips and tricks on using Twitter as we go through the Hangout. So my name's Mary Thomas. I'm from Concise Training, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about Google Hangouts, a little bit about Concise Training, social media in general, just putting it all into context, thinking particularly about who you are going to be representing on Twitter, thinking about different parts of a Twitter profile. I want to take the opportunity to introduce you to our Twitter e-learning course. Then we're going to come back and talk about the pros and cons of using Twitter for individuals or Twitter for businesses and making your engagement personal. How do you do that? So first of all, thinking about Google Hangouts on air. So what's the difference between a Google Hangout and a Google Hangout on air? With either, it's a webinar. You can have up to 9 people in the room and you can have video conferencing. If I just come back to the Google Hangout, things that I can do in here is put on a question and answer tab, or I can put on a chats area. So you can see now I have a chat area, and if anybody has got any watching who's got any questions, then they can look in my chat area. So a Google Hangout on air is live streamed to YouTube. So right now this Hangout is being live streamed to YouTube, to my Concise Training YouTube account, and anybody can watch it. So if you had more than 9 people and you couldn't fit them all in the room, then live streaming them to YouTube is a good option. And if it is live streamed to YouTube, then it will be available after the event on my channel. So I can attach keywords to it, add a description to it, and people can watch the event after forevermore. So it's a really nice way of creating useful videos that you can share with your audience. And Cadbury's have some very interesting Google Hangouts where they've had people coming in and tasting chocolate and the things. Other fashion companies often do Google Hangouts where they show people what the latest fashion is going to be and their fashion show, and people from all over the world can watch it via YouTube and feel as if they're in the event. So that's Google Hangouts on air. A little bit about Concise Training. So I started, that's a picture of me there on the right, Mary Thomas. I started Concise Training 6 years ago today. It's our 6th birthday. And I started originally as a Microsoft Office company. We train people and we still offer bespoke Microsoft Office training. But now the majority of our business is around social media marketing. I started using social media marketing myself, and I realised that it was a really good opportunity to tell others how to do it. And so in the last 6 years I've written books, as you can see, 2 on social media down here, 1 on Word. The 2 on the right are available from Bookboon, and the one on the left is available either through my website or for Amazon. We have a series of e-learning courses which are available through the website, and we have City and Guild's social media qualifications that we've developed the training for, and I've also developed the criteria for with City and Guilds. And I also do consultancy and training on all various different digital marketing tools, workshops here in Oxfordshire, or I'll come to client sites or by Skype, and we do training and consultancy across the range of digital marketing. So thinking about social media in general, there are lots of definitions of social media. This is my definition. The important word to take away from this is the word engaging. The majority of businesses use social media as a method of broadcasting or shouting about themselves, and then they get surprised when there's no return on investment. Actually, it's not very interesting just hearing somebody or some business talk about themselves. You need to think about, or the business needs to think about, how you can use the relevant tools to engage with or add value to your contacts. And you should only be using the right tools for your business. Facebook is definitely not a tool that every business should be using. You potentially can consider social media as a way of face-to-face networking online, and it's all about making that two-way conversation. Now, Twitter is one of the many social media tools you can use, and I'd always suggest that you make sure it's the right tool to use by doing a social media strategy first. But we're here to discuss Twitter. So thinking about Twitter in more detail. So you need to think about who you're representing. I'm just going to flip back here. Okay, so we have one viewer. Now, if we have any questions, please do enter the questions into the chat box, if you can see that, and we'll deal with those as we go along. And I'll keep flicking back every so often to check. But when you're looking at using Twitter, you need to think about who you're using it as. You're using it as you as an individual, just somebody who wants to know what's going on with the news feed. Perhaps you're just finding out the latest information, or since it's football transfer day today, the latest transfer will probably come out on Twitter before any other media. You might be using it as a business professional, so you might be using it as somebody who works in a business, and you're using it to do your own networking within the business, or you're using it to find a job, or you may be using it on behalf of a business. So if there's a business professional there, I meant sort of as a sole trader, but if you're using social media on behalf of a business, it's probably larger than a sole trader. And so you're representing the business, not you as an individual. And I hope that's pretty clear. I'll just flip back to see whether there's any questions on that. So taking that a little bit step further, think about the parts of a Twitter profile. There are several parts of a Twitter profile, and we need to think about how you can build your brand, either your personal brand or your business brand, by using all these different parts of the Twitter profile. And there is no right answer, and you have to make sure that it works for you. And I can critique my own profile here, and I know there's areas that we need to work on. And we're going through a bit of a change at the moment, which is what I'll talk about shortly. So parts of a Twitter profile. First of all, there's this header photo here. So this has been brought in by Twitter in the last 4 or 5 months, and allows you to have a nice big space where you can put some marketing material. There's no restrictions on what you can put there, so you can put text in there, you can talk about what you offer, you can put contact information effectively. This will be seen by anybody who looks at your Twitter profile on twitter.com. It won't be seen by people who use a social media management tool like Hootsuite, which is the one I recommend. So it's only when people actually come through on Twitter and see that. But still, it's worthwhile putting something reasonably good there to make sure that it's representing you and your brand. So your profile photo is this bit here. So this will be seen every time you do a status update. So you really need to make sure that it really gives a view of who you are and what your brand is. It needs to be very clear, because certainly if you're using something like Hootsuite, it will be seen in quite a small way, and so it needs to be quite distinctive. If I'm scrolling down a long list of people's tweets, I need to be able to quickly pick out the ones that I think might be interesting. And so using something very distinctive that matches your brand works. Now, we've chosen to use the little icon for Concise training. We could have used the icon and the words Concise training, but because the words Concise training are going to be as part of the profile name, I've decided to only use the little icon because it will be more distinct when people pick that out, because you have to shrink down that whole logo quite small. The Twitter username, here it's the @ConciseTraining bit. So this is how people will talk to you or about you on Twitter. They put the @ sign in front of the username, and it's @ConciseTraining, 15 characters long, a maximum. It has to be unique. Now, where possible, you need to make that very memorable and clearly linked to your brand. You want people to be able to talk to you on Twitter and to be able to easily remember your username. And I know personally it's very frustrating when I'm trying to talk to somebody on Twitter and they've got a really weird username and I can't really remember it. So it needs to be as distinctive as possible. Now that's not always easy because it can only be 15 characters and it has to be unique. So for anybody who's thinking of creating a new business now, not only do you need to make sure your domain name is free, but you also need to make sure that your Twitter username is free. Because I think that's really important, that there's a very clear match between the two. You also need then to put your full name. So here I've got my full name as Concise Training, and I'll explain why I've picked that in a bit. But you could put that as, could have that as Mary Thomas, and indeed I used to have that as Mary Thomas. Now people can search for you on Twitter either using your full name or your Twitter username. Now be warned on that, when I used to have Mary Thomas as my full name, people would generally search for me using Concise Training, and I wouldn't be found because Concise Training as my username is one word, whereas now I'll be found if people search for Concise Training as 2 words. I'm not sure if that's very clear, but so Concise Training wasn't found because it was 1 word, whereas Mary Thomas was found because it was 2 words, but then there's lots of Mary Thomases out there, so it's quite difficult to pick the right one. So hopefully that's pretty clear at the moment. I'm just going to check back to see if there's any outstanding questions. No, we're okay, good. So what I would like to do now, just very quickly, is mention our Twitter e-learning course. So you'll get all this sort of information and more within the Twitter e-learning course. As you can see, there's 3 learning objects. It adds up to about 9 hours of training, and you can purchase the course through Concise Training, and you get about 60 days unlimited access to the training course. So you can go in as many times as you'd like. And I've just shown you a couple of screenshots there. It's a very interactive course. There's lots of different links to go through. There's audio. There's also videos to watch, and you can re-watch them. And as you can see, you can click on these various different segments to get more information. We have exercises to do. So it's the course that takes you all the way through from not knowing anything about Twitter or knowing a little bit about Twitter, right the way through to how to measure it using Hootsuite, using advertising. So it's the whole deal. We, at the end of this course, I'm going to give you a discount code if you'd like to purchase the course from us this week. So do stay with us. So I want to show you a little bit about the thought process that I've been through recently in the way that Concise Training has used Twitter. So 6 years ago, I started using Twitter. I was a sole trader, and we'd already identified the name as Concise Training, which was really good because it was available on Twitter. So I used a Concise Training username, and I used a picture of me because it was me who was doing all the tweeting, and I used my full name, Mary Thomas. And then there was a little bio about me, a little biography about me. It worked really well, both as a content marketing tool, in which I shared useful tips and information, as well as a relationship marketing tool to talk to individual customers and prospects. And it's worked very well for a number of years. However, Concise Training has now grown, and I'm spending a lot of my time doing training of various sorts. And about a year ago, 8 months ago, I was very aware that I wasn't using social media as well as I should be because I was out doing some training. So I employed somebody on a part-time basis to help me manage my own social media, but also to sell her out to clients. And now we've got 2 people in that team. So my team are now managing my social media, and they're tweeting on my behalf, and they're adding value content, and it's all content that I create, but it's being managed by my team. Now, this has given me an issue recently with personal integrity. I was finding that people were talking to me because they thought it was me that was tweeting, but not actually talking to me. So somebody else, one of my team, was replying on my behalf. And there was a couple of mismatches where I hadn't perhaps given my team quite enough information about the individuals, and so the reply was a bit strange, perhaps because the individual knew me quite well. So we've recently decided to change things a bit. So my Concise training profile now has been changed so that it is clearly a company profile. So it's used for content marketing, and it is also used for relationship marketing, but the relationships would be between the company Concise training and the clients or the individuals, as opposed to me, Mary, and the client. Because people are doing our e-learning courses and getting a relationship with Concise training, the company, and they don't necessarily need a relationship with Mary Thomas as an individual. So I've changed the logo from me, I've changed the name to Concise Training, but kept the Twitter username. And the fantastic thing about Twitter is you can change all of this, and I could actually have changed the Twitter username, and it would have filtered down through all the databases so that I would still keep my 5,000 followers. And then I've also created a Mary at Concise, which is very clearly a picture of me, and I've very clearly stated on it then it is my personal account. And I've also very clearly stated that I'll be tweeting on an ad hoc basis. I wanted to take the pressure off me having to tweet as often as I tell my clients they ought to, because Concise Training is still tweeting that many times, and we are still tweeting 5 to 10 times a day. So I can use this with much more freedom, and I can use it very successfully for relationship marketing. So the Concise Training account will be used for both content marketing and relationship marketing, whereas my personal account will be used for my personal marketing. And one of the things we're going to do on the Concise Training account that we haven't done yet is add pictures of the team. So the people that will be tweeting, that we doing the social media on behalf of Concise Training, will be added to the profile and across that top banding of the header profile, so people know exactly who it is. And where necessary, they'll also add their initials to their tweets to show the relationship marketing. One of the really good examples of big business doing that is Greater Anglia. So this is a screenshot of the Greater Anglia account, and you can see that at the end of this tweet they've added their initials. So JH has done this tweet, and what you'll find if you watch their account is that they will introduce themselves at the start of their shift, tell you exactly who is going to be dealing with the Twitter or helping individuals get through the train service. And what you find is that there's less anger, less abuse, because people think they're talking to an individual person. So I want to make sure with Concise Training that we still get that individual personality, to make sure people still realise that they're engaging. And so that's what we'll be doing going forward, is we'll be adding initials to the tweets where we can. So finally, thinking about engagement, how can you make your engagement personal? So one of the ways is by adding your initials. I would always make sure that you thank people for following, thank people when they are to you. And it's a good idea to try and continue conversations when thanking. So, thanks very much for the tweet, and then say something about the individual. Perhaps you've already got a relationship with them. Perhaps you need to look at the profile and find out a little bit more information about them, or have a look at what they're saying on their Twitter account and mention that. Perhaps you want to use people's names in the replies, because again, that makes a little bit of personality, a little bit of individuality to it. As I said, adding your own initials to replies works really well. And you might want to ask questions or be real. You can follow clients or potential clients, and you can find people who are talking about your keywords or are in your geographical area. So if somebody's having a conversation about a service that you provide, it's a good idea to offer help. Never sell, always offer help. So there's a couple of tips and tricks for using Twitter. I hope that's been useful. As I said, if you'd like to purchase the Concise Online Twitter course, that's the link to it. You can find that on my website. If you look at concisetraining.net and look at online courses, you'll see all our courses, and the Twitter for Business online course is available. It's £97 plus VAT normally, but you get a 20% discount with this code, TWIT Hangout, that you can enter at checkout, and its code will be valid until the end of the week. And our next Hangout will be on the Monday, the October the 6th at 2 o'clock again, and it will be all about optimizing a LinkedIn profile. So before I go, I just want to check whether there's any questions, and thank you very much for listening to this Hangout. So if you do have any questions, if you can enter them into this chat area here at the bottom, then that will be great. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed it.